Now let's shift focus to banking sector where it held steady in Q4 credit growth. If you saw the numbers, the credit growth did remain healthy and deposit accretion was stable and margins still remains resilient comparatively. While some divergence was seen in the performance, the broader trend points strength of core fundamentals of the banking sector. Gaurav is joining us with more the details on how actually Q4 panned out.
When we talk about banking sector as a whole, we have already seen that the large private sector banks actually came up with good set of number, except for a few. In fact, when we look at the growth trend, let's not forget that system was in a liquidity deficit. But despite this environment, when we talk about banks like ICICI Bank and HDFC Bank, we have seen a strong performance in this quarter. In fact, when we talk about HDFC Bank, despite having that big base, the QOQ growth remains strong in terms of loan book growth. Other than that, when we talk about SBI, the biggest bank, they also reported a very healthy set of number. But what happened is that for the guidance, they have actually cut down a little, or rather they have slowed down a little as a conscious stance. On the other hand, when we talk about banks like Axis Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank, we saw a weak set of numbers, and this is on the back of the growth trend because these banks actually suggested that the growth can actually slow down from here on. Let's not also forget that the system growth is also slowed down, and that is the reason why the cautious stance came from these banks. Other than that, let's also focus on some of the banks who are focused more on the MFI sector, because this sector was actually a pain point in the entire industry. But when we talk about the industry results, RBL Bank actually came up with a good set of commentary, because what they have said is that in Q2 FY26 we will see some kind of recovery in the MFI segment, which was actually positive. But on the other hand, when we talk about Bandhan Bank, again a same candidate who have a heavy exposure in MFI, what happened is that a weak set of number is what we saw, and that was because they are now moving into more secured segment. Other than that, let's also not forget about the mid-sized bank like Federal Bank and IDFC First Bank. For Federal Bank, what we saw is that Federal Bank is in a transition phase, and that is the reason why a little bit of slowdown is what we saw. But in terms of IDFC First Bank, we saw good set of numbers. In fact, we also saw fundraising of around 7,500 rupees from the bank. Let's also not forget about the small banks like City Union Bank and DCB Bank. A very good set of turnaround is what we saw. City Union Bank actually reported a double-digit growth for the first time after after many quarters, and at the same time, DCB Bank also reported healthy set of numbers. Let's also move our focus on PSU banks, because here we saw a good set of numbers, but a loan book growth was a little below. When we talk about NIMs and as well as the CASA ratio, there also the commentary was a little weak, because when we look at PSU banks, CASA ratio has been consistently under pressure, and that is what the banks have also indicated even going ahead. Let's not forget that we are also yet to see another rate cut, and that is the reason why these banks have remained cautious. Net interest margins are definitely going to be in pressure across the banking sectors, but specifically in PSU bank, what trend we saw was the fundraising, because let's highlight a few. SBI has now got an approval of fundraising of 25,000 crore rupees. Indian Bank also got an equity fundraise approval up to 5,000 crore rupees, and we have Bank of Maharashtra who has also got an approval of fundraising up to 7,500 crore rupees. So definitely this was something that we saw that in FY26 can come from the PSU banks. But all in all, a good set of numbers from private sector banks and a average set of number from PSU bank is what we have seen in Q4 FY25.
All right, thank you, Gaurav, for getting us that snapshot of banks as far as the Q4 is concerned. But on